junior hires. Man, I know you're sitting in community groups right now, and we're going into our second week of this series of talk. I'm here with Christy, and we're just going to talk about a little bit what Pastor Jeff talked about, and maybe questions that you might be processing. Just as, man, you guys are in junior high, and you're first starting to go through like different feelings, emotions, physical change, all these things. And so today we're going to talk about like sexual immorality. And I know for you guys that might be like a cringe topic sometimes, or you might be like, man, I've never heard about these things. And some of you guys might be already like struggling with processing these things. So, you know, we're going to talk about pornography. We're going to talk about same-sex attraction. We're going to talk about like heterosexual like immorality, like, and what that all can look like. But Christy, I'm just curious, like, how can we do that in a compassionate way? Like, how can we, when a friend of ours or someone at school that, you know, knows nothing about like our relationship with Jesus or whatever, right? How can we sit with them and compassionately just listen? Like how would you tell like even like your kids to do that?
Well,
yeah.
Well, I think it's always important to just appreciate the person who's in front of you, and always see that no matter what issue they've got, that they were designed by God, and God loves that person just as much as he loves you,
right.
Just as much as he loves the person next to them. There, you know, in that sense, there's no deciphering between that. And so when you stop and think about that first, I think that gives you a perspective on how to listen to them.
Yeah.
And you know, I often think, if that were Jesus in front of me, how would I react?
Right.
And so I think in the church, in the past, in a lot of religions, we can come across quite judgy. But I think the best thing to do is just to sit and listen and ask questions, see where they're coming from, and not make judgments straight up. But most of all, just see them as a person, as a human. You know, we all have issues that we're dealing with. And as if they're not a Christian, we can't assume anything of them, because they may not have even heard it. If they are a Christian, they may not have heard that either. I think even like, what is morality? They might not even know what immoral is, you know, and why it's so good. And so I think, you know, as a Christian, if you're talking to another person who is interested or is a Christian, you can remember that God is good, and he is trustworthy, and he's put all of this stuff into a little book for us, like a manual on the best way to live, and he's done it actually to give us freedom. When I was, you know, junior high age, we often got told in church that you have freedom through all the time, but they never told us how we got freedom. And I've since found out as an adult, freedom is like God giving us the best way to live. We can choose to live any way we want, but what's the best way to live? And we can't assume whatever step of the journey that anyone's on, whether they are a Christian or not. I think it's really important just to see where they're coming from, and then coming from that definitely a compassionate side of things, and trying to offer help more than judging and telling them what they need to change, because I don't think that in history that's ever worked super well.
No, that's good. Something that I've been like leaning into just with relationships as a whole with people, not even like dealing with like immorality or any of these things. It's more of like to be curious first instead of being judgmental, because I think that if I lead with judgmental, I'm filling in all these different assumptions of what I think it could be, because I'm judging without asking questions. So I love this idea of like being curious, of like, hey, like, what are you feeling? How do you feel? Like, have you told anyone? Like, are you scared? Like, you know, trying to figure out what is underneath the water, in a sense. Like, if we imagine that it's this iceberg, and we're looking at, oh, this is what the person is telling me, right? Whatever that be. In this case, being like, oh, like this sexual sin that I'm struggling with. Maybe I'm looking at porn or whatever. Like, that might be the iceberg that we see on top, but there might be so many things underneath that as to, man, why are you looking at this? Like, is there a deeper like root and like hurt behind that? Like, maybe there's an upbringing thing of like, you were hurt when you were younger, and this is just kind of like your outlet and escape.
or just patterns that you've allowed to develop in your life where it's led to that. You know, one thing kind of leads to the other. Yeah, for sure.
Man, I know we're going to be talking about sexual immorality and morality and maybe all these big words that, like, could we just define those first? Of like, what does the Bible tell us about what it means to be sexually immoral? Like, is that just to one group of people, or is that to all humans as a whole?
I think morality, easily, I try to think, what if I had to measure myself against Jesus and what he would do, that would be how I would define morality easily. Yeah. And that means that, do I trust that he has the best for me in mind? I don't know everything in the world, and the older I get, I actually realize more and more that I don't know everything. And so it's so great knowing that God has a plan. He designed us, so therefore he knows the best way that we flourish. He allows us to be able to choose whatever we want to do, and we can do that, but is that the best way for us? So I guess morality, to me, if I were just to define it simply for myself to think it through, is this good for me, and would Jesus do something like that?
Yeah. So if we talk about like being sexually immoral, I think Pastor Jeff, apologized to the LGBTQ community, because I think the church has handled that poorly in the past, of like making people feel like, man, Jesus had to like hang a little longer for that sin, right? Yeah. For them feeling those things. So I think if we could spend some time just talking about sexual immorality, of like, man, is it just to one particular group of people, or is it to all of us?
Yeah, I think in the Bible it talks more to people who are married about how we conduct ourselves if we have been married. Basically just things like sex outside marriage and that kind of thing. But I think too, it's important to think, are we doing things because we want to, or are we going to have self-control, which is one of the fruits of the Spirit? Are we going to indulge in that, or are we going to think, this isn't the best for me or other people around me, or even my culture? And I think if you look at, if that's the case, then there's so many great things in the world that God has given us. And if we have them out of balance, like if we focus too much on one of them in either way, then that becomes an idol. That's the thing that we pursue rather than God. And if we spend time with God every day, he changes our mind, and he helps us often be moral without even trying, because he's renewing our mind. And I think it's so hard, in our culture, we have so much that we hear and we see through what we watch and who we talk to, what's put in our face in our culture, that it's actually difficult to see what the morals are, which makes it even more important to just get to know Jesus, get to know what he says, and realize he's trustworthy, and that no matter what in life, he's the one who's going to give me true freedom. I also think, you can have idols like, say I want to be popular or really pretty. I think it's the same kind of thing. Am I going to pursue that? Am I going to be wanting to wear the best clothes, or am I going to say everything about me I'm going to give to him, because I'm part of his family? I'm living under his banner, and because of that, I just give him everything. Therefore I actually choose to give up everything I want to choose about myself, or everything I want to do, all the indulgences I want to pursue. And I say, God, you created great things. The best way it works. So therefore, I'm just going to give that to you, and I'm going to ask you to take that and just make beauty out of that, and help me to have the self-discipline to be able to follow that and trust in him and start to see how God works that out. I think too, we often put a balance. I think there's more consequences sometimes to these things, but deep down, they're all sins. They're all things that don't match up to God.
Because I think in that, it's felt so taboo to talk about. So I think that, like, not just students, but like people as a whole, like in the church, that they have this thing that they're battling with, that they're like, man, I know this is wrong, but I don't want to talk about it because it's been made to feel like I'm going to be thought of less of, or like I'm the worst because of this idea of like, man, this is an unforgivable sin.
Yeah.
But it's really not.
Because if you have anger issues, that's going to be damaging to people just the same.
Right.
But, you know, we often think that's okay. I think as a church too, we used to lean so much on the side of judgment, which, you know, you want to help your friends by saying, hey, I don't know if that's the best for you. But I think the way it was done had created a culture over time where that's kind of how we said it too, you know, to each other. It was judgy.
Yeah.
And it didn't look to the heart of the person. And again, I don't think it then comes back to how Jesus would look at the person, because he's not standing there going like, oh my goodness, I knew it. You know, he's looking at you and he's just like, you know, I often think it's hard to know when you're not a parent yet, but you've just become one, and you look at them and you know, beforehand you'd look at babies and you'd be like, oh, that's so cute. But now you're like, oh, I just want to protect them so much because I just love them. And even if they do, you know, the unthinkable, whatever that may be in your own head, I just want the best for them. So instead of him being like, oh, child, come on, he's more like, oh, child, like, just I'm here, just turn to me and I can help you. And
I think in that too, like, just touching back to groups and how we have leaders that care for students, I just want to kind of remind every junior hire that's watching this that in your group is a safe space to, like, if you're somebody that's like struggling with any of these things, like whether you've already kind of indulged in pornography or like you're trying to figure out like, man, what's my identity, what I feel, all these other things that like, we want to create a space where that's safe for you to process, to unpack. And I mean, you can talk to your leader, you can talk to your peers because they want to do life with you and not let you walk that journey alone. But we also have a bunch of other resources that even if your leader doesn't know how to answer those questions or how to give you the right answer, there might not be a right answer, that we're just here with you because you're not meant to do life alone.
I think too, just to add, I think sometimes it can feel like when you're thinking these things and you can't share it, that it becomes so big. And often if you can just talk to someone, you can work it through and it's not as big as what you think. I think, you know, at your age, you're just trying to get through. And there's people here who have lived it and can help you get through. And the people around you that you get to chat with, they can just talk with you and it doesn't need to be shared with anyone else. But that's the power of groups, right?
Yeah, so man, I pray that your group goes well, that you're able to have honest and authentic conversations, and that you feel at the end of the group just seen, known, and loved. We'll see you guys later.